Hi, so today we're going to talk about a subject that maybe some will find difficult, but it's a very necessary conversation in life, I think. And so we're going to talk a bit about bereavement and how to support clients that are suffering from loss, or other birth workers, or how to get support for yourself. But I'm not going to do the talking. I have the incredible Alexandra Wilson here. And she's going to just talk to us about different things within her experience and the work that she does to help us maybe have a little more understanding, maybe a little more sensitivity in this area. So, hi, Alexandra.
Hello.
Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
So, tell us a bit about you and what you do.
Most recently, I have started the Red Tent End of Life Doula Preparation Training, which sits under Nicola Goodall's Red Tent Doula Preparation. So I do the end of life side of things, and I'm also an end of life doula and a birth doula, and I'm also part of a project to establish a sustainable hospice.
Okay.
It's all very interesting, and I work, my sort of bread and butter work is often bereavement support, grief work, that's therapeutic grief work, and counselling and ceremonies. So I do a lot of ceremonies, mostly funerals, to be honest, which some people are like, oh, how terrible, but for me, I absolutely love it. So,
wonderful.
Bit about me anyway. Bit different.
A bit different, but very, very needed in a world where in a way death is almost like a taboo subject. We try very hard to run from it, maybe because of our own fears about our own mortality. Mm-hmm. We hide our families away from it, and I do feel it's something that when you're confronted with it, suddenly there's this huge thing, whereas if it was part of life the way it's very much part of your life, I think, if I'm right, then these things, yes, they're still sad and tragic and shocking, but you're not so busy there that you're not in the present moment, if you understand what I've just articulated so very badly.
Well, I mean, I think the thing about bereavement is that it's time consuming.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to plan for. Often people don't plan for bereavement, and why would you?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, in order to do your grief justice, it does take time and energy. And if you've got a very, very busy life, if you've got a life that you're just, that keeps going, whether you want it to or not, actually finding the time to do your grief justice is incredibly difficult. So it has grief has the amazing capacity to blindside us in many ways, and forces us to look and reevaluate and reprioritize. But a lot of us, I don't mean individually, but I think culturally, generally in our society, we aren't really prepared to stop long enough to feel those feelings that would demand our attention. And unexpressed grief, I personally believe, is a significant factor in mental health problems, depression, anxiety. It's a major issue that's facing our world today. We don't have the community structures that we used to, that would hold us. So largely we're living in a pretty isolated and lonely world.
Yes.
And so, we can get along with that, I think, pretty well until something major happens to us, and then where's our tribe? Where are our people?
Yeah.
It's tough.
So that moves us sort of relatively neatly into what I'd like us to talk about today. So it's a sad fact in life that with birth comes death sometimes.
Yeah.
And so I suppose my question is, how would we as birth workers, how do we support clients who face an unexpected loss, or even a loss that that they're carrying a baby that they know has already passed, has already
Mm.
died?
Mm. Well, I mean, I guess that I'd start by saying that there can't really be a gold standard of getting it right. I think we have to show up in our humanity and acknowledge for ourselves that it's an incredibly difficult situation that we would find ourselves in, supporting a family in an even worse situation.
Yeah.
And to try to surrender and release any sense of needing to get it right or perfect, or that there's any right way of doing it. It is quite possible when you venture into the field of sudden loss or deep loss like that, that you might feel like you just don't know what to say, or anything you do is wrong. And do you know what? Even your clients might even tell you that, because they're going to be potentially angry, losing their minds, and you just don't know what you're walking into. And so my counsel is always to attend as best you can to the present moment, to be as present as you can be, and as sensitive as you can be to what the needs of your client and yourself are in the present moment, and try not to get overwhelmed, although it's difficult, but try not to project into tomorrow and the week after and the month after, or try to let go of what happened yesterday. Just really be there.
Yeah.
And be led by your client, and they may not know what they need, but start by asking them, what do you need right now? And some people, well, a lot of people will find that their friends and family will want to help,
Yeah.
and will have no idea how to. As a result of that, people can become isolated quite quickly, even though their friends and family might be trying to show them the love that they feel for them and the loss that they feel for them. They might be saying it in the wrong way. They might be avoiding them. They might be crowding them. So just creating a little bit of space. And for some people, they might want to talk,
Right.
and you might be the only person with whom they can have a conversation that doesn't upset. Well, it might upset you, but you're not their mum, or you're not their sister. So you should be able to be there and have a conversation with them that is emotionally present, but you're not distraught. I hope that makes sense. But for some people, they may not want to talk. They may not be ready to talk, and you could be part of holding space for them to be in the non-verbal space, and keep their mum and their auntie and their sister in the kitchen, allowing them that space. You just need to find out what that individual needs.
Yeah.
There isn't, as you know, as any doula knows, there is no one size fits all. You've really got to respond in the moment to what's needed. You've got to look after yourself. My goodness, and not for a second think that you're beyond emotion, because that to have been alongside a family who are on that journey, and all of us will have had that kind of anticipation of a positive outcome potentially.
Yeah.
That's a loss. Just that, knowing that, and feeling and loving those people the way that we do. It would be impossible not to get upset. So we need our circles around us. We need our community. You need your mentor. You need your buddies. You need to debrief and attend to your self-care.
And so you talk about how we can support our clients, and that one size doesn't fit all. And you're right, of course, that there is no one right way, because we all grieve in very different ways, and how I might grieve might not be how my client would grieve. And so it's the learning to hold back the way I think they should respond. Having supported a stillbirth where there was a lot of laughter, and I know that some people find that really difficult to accept, that in the middle of that there was a lot of laughter and a lot of love and a lot of joy, and the way it flips back into sort of more traditional grief. And so I think that's a really important thing for us to note, that there is no one size that fits.
There really isn't. But and thank you for that, because one of the most common misconceptions about grief is that it only contains the negative emotions of anger or sadness. Grief has all of human emotion within it. As far as I'm concerned, there isn't a difference between grief and love.
Yeah.
It's just that grief is the love that doesn't have a place to go. It doesn't have an object to attach itself to. So it is a wandering love that feels a loss of its place in the world. But there is joy, there is laughter, there is lightness. There are the memories, there are the just the little sweet moments of connection that happen during grief that we could so easily overlook because we're so used to it, we're so conditioned to think of it as being dark and drudgery and all of that side of things. And of course that is there in spades. But yeah, the human expression of grief just has no template whatsoever.
No. So what in all of that, you mentioned as well the need to look after ourselves, so not the bereaved someone, because but in the middle of being with them in whatever they need us to be, you mentioned looking after ourselves. Can you talk more on that, ways, and I know that there won't be any one way, but different ways that can look for us as the birth worker?
In my opinion, I think it's imperative that we all do our own work on our own grief, because bereavement is a very specific period of time. So a bereavement is the period of adjustment that follows a loss.
Yeah.
So you have a loss, and then you're at some point either going to have to find a way to be with that, or it breaks you forever, and that might be the case for some people.
Yeah.
But that period that follows the loss is the bereavement. But the feeling of grief is not specific to a bereavement. Grief is present in our lives from the moment we're conceived. Grief is just part of the human experience. And because, again, like I say, culturally we've learned to repress it and we don't express it because we're frightened of it, then it builds up and builds up and builds up in our system. And for me, grief is like water. It has to flow. It has to. Otherwise it stagnates. And stagnant grief is toxic, whereas free-flowing grief is healthy. And in my experience, ever since I first picked up the birth doula work, it is my observation that an awful lot of birth keepers hold a lot of grief. And I think this is partly because we don't understand that grief and bereavement are not the same thing. So that we're building up a reservoir of grief within us that has never been touched because we don't understand where it might have come from.
Yeah.
And also because there's a lot of grief in birth anyway. Even in the healthiest of births, I believe there's grief there because there's change. Wherever there's change, there's loss, because you change from one thing to another. And so there's loss, and therefore there's grief. Even in the happiest possible outcome of birth, there's a possibility for that mother to grieve her life before that's changed completely now, or the family to change, that father to, whoever is going to have to adapt and change, and life is not going to be the same again. So there's grief in every birth, but then there's so much on the birth journey, even before conception, maybe previous miscarriages or stillbirths or IVF, or, longing and not getting, or, there's so much potential. Or maybe your mum died or your parents died before they got to meet the baby, or, the landscape of grief in birth is not widely acknowledged. And so I observe birth keepers generally being heavy and laden and burdened by the griefs that they've experienced, even from their clients, but also their own. And it's, we are by nature caring people, but the shadow of caring is to be codependent, isn't it? So we carry without good boundaries the pain of others, and being in the habit of discharging that grief that we carry for others through healthy methods, not unhealthy methods like self-harm or, or addictions, but starting to discharge that through catharsis, group work, body work. My personal self-care routine includes shiatsu, kinesiology, supervision, group grief work, and having a really strong network of people, along with, I also get regular massages, and I have a spiritual practice, and I spend time in nature, and I live up in the mountains because nature is important to me. I don't think I could do as much work with grief and death and dying as I do if I lived right in the centre of London. I think the connection to the earth and to our communities is essential. It isn't just a self-care isn't just a hot bath and a cup of tea. Although if you're out on getting your hot bath and your cup of tea, definitely have a hot bath and a cup of tea. But that isn't, you can't tick off your self-care off your list and say, oh, I'm done now. Self-care means that you live a life that's led by your needs, and that you never, ever, ever put somebody else's needs before your own, such that you are incapacitated to serve into the future. You have to play a long game in terms of service and make sure that you're looking after yourself and your beloveds. Tend to your family. Don't neglect your family because you're caring for others. Make sure you've got yourself and your family as your priorities. Sounds very naggy of me, but I just see it. I see it all the time, and I know it's difficult. I know it's difficult because we've set ourselves up in the world to be of service, and there's so much need out there, and knowing where my role or one's role begins and ends, good boundaries and holding those boundaries is essential. I think we just become overwhelmed with other people's sorrow otherwise.
Yeah. So can you? It's a subject that I always find important to talk to people about, with people about, the subject of boundaries. So, I mean, I have seen good examples and bad examples of supporting someone during bereavement. A bad example was a doula who, with the best intentions, wanted to spare the couple hard tasks, things that would make them grieve more, in her words, and so had arranged, funeral directors and people to take photos and do footprints, etc., etc. And then, and then on the other extreme, people who are just totally sort of just following the client's need, the parent's need. But in both cases, I feel that boundaries are good to have. So could you talk more to boundaries and things? It's really hard because I think you're right. We've got ourselves in this caring profession, mostly because we are caring people. And it seems, or it can seem, cold and unfeeling to have and set boundaries. So, but I'd like you to talk to it, because I would just talk forever.
Yeah, don't worry, me too as well. You may need to stop me. I mean, my experience of developing good boundaries has been one of just repeatedly finding myself on the wrong side of my own boundaries. Just repeatedly, I was going to say the F word, repeatedly messing up, and repeatedly messing up and going, oh my God, my boundaries need improving. And each time they've tightened and tightened. And I mean, boundaries are not impermeable. Boundaries are just fair holding guidelines as to where your role begins and ends. And that's where I find supervision really, really important. Like I may not know in the moment what is the appropriate scope and range of my role. So I need somebody else to check it out with, so that I ask them, do you think this is an appropriate aspect of my role? But one of the things that I'm really big on, and I'm really keen to share this with my students as well, is the contract at the beginning of the relationship.
Right.
The contract at the beginning. And I don't literally necessarily mean a legal contract, but when you get together in the very, very first instance, that's your opportunity to set out your stall and say what you can offer and what you can do, and for them, your clients, to ask for what they want from you, and to get it in writing and to be utterly clear about it, so that you've got a frame of reference, point of reference to go back to. Now, it would actually make a lot of sense for there to be a clause in there at the beginning that just sets out what you can and can't do in the event of a stillbirth or a miscarriage, or because what could happen is you end up with a contract for a healthy birth that goes ahead, and then the shock comes in and your boundaries just out the window, because you are in deep compassion and care, and in that moment you don't feel like you could possibly say no, or possibly go home, or possibly And it's really important to think through what would you like to be able to offer in the event of such a circumstance happening? What would be appropriate? And if you're able to have that conversation with your client up front, then you could loosely work in how would you be rewarded for that?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that conversation about payment, then are you going to have that conversation with bereaved parents afterwards?
Yeah.
You know, is it more cold and callous to have a conversation up front saying, I absolutely would be devastated if this was the outcome, but we do need to talk about it because it is a possibility, as you know, as they will. They're not stupid. They'll know that it's a possibility.
Yeah.
So in the event of the baby dying, this is what I can offer, and this would be how I would charge. And are you okay with that up front?
Yeah.
You may not even hold them to it. You may not even in the end decide to charge them for that time. But if you've had it, have it out. Plan for war at times of peace, so they say. So make your preparation in advance.
Yeah.
But who's to know and who's to judge? But I think I wouldn't like to find myself in a situation where I hadn't had some sort of conversation about that up front.
Yeah.
But if you do, then don't judge yourself harshly, because this is life. And I would say that you perhaps might ask in a couple of sister doulas, just get yourself a doula, get some sister doulas alongside you. Don't tackle it alone.
Yeah.
Start to spread some of that. There's a growing number of us who have done the end of life doula training with me and with other organisations. You could look up an end of life doula in your area. Just anchor into some support. Check it out with people. Am I over delivering?
Yeah.
Am I over committed?
Yeah.
Have I gone too far? Where's my line about what is mine and what is theirs? Because no one's going to thank you for overperforming
Yeah.
and taking away from some of those really heartbreaking but essential tasks that happen after death, that are part of the grieving process. If you take that away from people, you've taken away an opportunity for them for their psyche to adjust to the reality of that loss. So hard as it is, the power and the action has to remain with the client. No different, really, is it?
No.
Birth, death.
No, it really isn't
at all. Yeah, who's in power, who's in control? And if it's you, you're out of contract. You're out of your boundaries. Yeah.
So, this is a subject that we could probably talk on for hours, and I actually think that birth workers should find some form of, for want of a better word, which seems to be my phrase today, some sort of training or preparation for themselves. And I remember when I supported that stillbirth, the last thing in my mind would be that I would ever be at a birth that ended, without a live baby. And so in the moment, I know that what I did was fine. And the things that you talk about, having people around you, and I immediately had someone who I just said, this is what's happening. And she said, well, I'll be there, and I'll be at the end of the phone when you need me. But I really do think that it is so worth having some form of preparation for the like you said. In fact, I really like that, plan for war in the time of peace, so have that so that it's in your back pocket, and if you need to call on it, you can call on it, and if you never need to call on it, then you're truly blessed, and that's wonderful. So those are my thoughts on it. What are your thoughts?
I'm all for preparation, and I'm also for community. So I know for myself that the end of life doula preparation is a community development role. It isn't just about the individual doula. We have to build networks, we have to build the community, and we also have to be in our local communities, showing up as the people who are willing to have these difficult conversations, and starting to network and bring together the people, so-called professionals. But who is a professional in the face of death and dying? Who knows? but yeah, the actual support structures, the NHS, social services, whatever structures are out there, systems are out there, but also the people who can support you and who would be able to support a member of your community should the worst happen. So it isn't just about preparing yourself with knowledge, it's also preparing yourself with practice, and it's preparing yourself with community. And that activity, I don't think, can be separated from birth work, to be honest. I don't, and it sounds like I'm making a job for myself, but at the same time, I feel like this is my calling. I do feel that this is something that I want to be able to share. And I don't necessarily mean doing end of life doula training. I just mean perhaps having those conversations within our communities, within our existing networks, that starts to open it out. And certainly, I've run days around ceremony and ritual for baby loss, and they've been massively well attended. Such a real kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say taboo, but it's a subject that
it's uncomfortable.
There's a lot of secrecy. Yeah, there's a lot of just shyness around it, because I don't know. There's I mean, even going back 50 years, it wouldn't have been ever spoken about.
Yeah.
So we're really at the cutting edge and the vanguard of a generation. Only in the last generation or two will people openly talk about the loss of babies and the effect it's had on them, and for that to be validated as well. And then I still think it gets invalidated. I still hear stories, even in recent times, of people just being encouraged to have another baby straight away, or just to get back to work, or to, these kind of well-meaning but utterly divorced from any kind of compassion or reality advice that people give.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I've rambled. I told you I ramble. So I don't know where I am now, where I started.
Well, I think as we bring this conversation to a close, I mean, you've already begun to tell us that there are so many strands, that one size doesn't fit all, that it's important that we have self-care as we're supporting people, and that we look at our boundaries and set up our contracts, whether that's a physical contract or however that works. And I think if you were to just give one or two words of wisdom as to how to, I suppose, well, one, how to support those going through loss, and the other, how do we, very succinctly, how do we support or get support for ourselves?
My feeling is the number one thing that people do not get when they're going through loss is permission. Not necessarily like written permission, but permission to just be and feel what they're feeling.
Yeah.
So if all you do is to hold space, to validate them, to say it is sad. Don't look for the positives in it. This is awful, and it is sad, and however they feel today is appropriate.
Yeah.
And to give them the space to talk if they want to talk, but not force them to talk if they don't want to talk.
Yeah.
And not be frightened to use words like dead or dying or, loss. Strong words, grief, these are strong words.
Yeah.
But when people dance around them with euphemisms and, try to pretend that it's not happening, nobody thanks you for that. No. So just being really present, really honest, and really open, responsive, that would be the way to be with somebody, if you can. And then succinctly, how to do that for ourselves, I think we just need to apply the same principles to ourselves.
Yeah.
We need space. We need permission to feel how we feel. It needs to be okay to be who we are today, and to ask for help. Don't go it alone.
Yeah.
Like I say, that this is definitely a community issue.
Yeah.
This is a challenge to hold people, and I'm delighted in a way that this is part of my work.
Yeah.
Strengthening, building those circles.
Yeah. Alexandra, thank you so much for the time that you've spent sharing with us, and I hope that we all sit and reflect on the things that we've heard today, and that it really does inform our practice. Once again, thank you for your time, and thank you that this is your calling and this is where your heart is, because, you know, we need that. We need that in our lives. So I'll make sure that there are resources so that you can find out where to reach out to Alexandra if you'd like to, and other resources that can maybe help us as birth workers as we walk along this path. My greatest wish is that none of us have to support loss in this way, but the pragmatic realist side of me knows that, yeah, there's always that possibility, you know. But anyway, so thank you all for listening, and for spending time with me and Alexandra. Speak soon.